Well, here we are back again with another takedown, once again, of Tomi Lahren.
Oh, Colin Kaepernick, I've got some final thoughts for you, bud.
So, Tommy, you thought that you had words for Colin Kaepernick. Well, you ain't heard nothing yet, because we got words for you. Now, in her video, she starts off by referring to Colin Kaepernick. For those who are not familiar, this is the football player from the 49ers team who has taken a stand to sit when the United States national anthem is played, because he feels that at this moment the country is not standing up to its principles, and he's correct. So he says that he's not going to stand for it until he sees a change in the way the nation, deals with the injustices that are perpetrated against the oppressed. Right? So in reference to this, Tomi Lahren refers to him as a whiny, attention-seeking crybaby.
It's this country, the country that you have so much disdain for, that allows you the right to speak your mind. It protects your right to be a whiny, indulgent, attention-seeking crybaby.
Now this is interesting, because this is what suspected white supremacists always do. Whenever we decide to speak out against the injustices that are perpetrated against us by the systemic racist, white racist system, then it's a problem. Then we're whining, we're complaining, we're playing victims, whatever thing they can say against us, right? So it's always when we decide to speak out against the evils that they do, right? When they want to bitch and moan about Islamic terrorists, radicals, ISIS or whoever, that's perfectly fine and well. But when we decide to speak up and remind them that, hold up, you're doing things against us, you're violating our rights, you're being racist, discriminatory, etc., then it's, oh, you're whining, we don't want to hear that, get over it, all this. They never want to hear about the evils that they commit against others. And when you do so, then you're a bad guy, you're a whiner, you're a crybaby, etc. But again, how dare she refer to him as being a whining crybaby when he's speaking out against racism and injustice? So it's whiny when you speak out against legitimate cases of injustices and racism and stuff, But this is how they are. Then from there, she goes into the same BS line about patriots who fought and died.
Are patriots of every race that have fought and died for this country, and we honor the flag and sing the anthem as a reminder.
For our right to do this or to do that. Look, I'm going to lay it on the line like I've said it before. None of these wars, not one of them, have been fought especially for black Americans' right to do anything. In fact, when many of these wars were going on, our rights were being violated while the wars were going on, while these wars were being fought. Our rights were being violated during World War I, right here by this country that we live in. Our rights were being violated not by some outside enemy, but by an inward enemy right here during World War II. Our rights were being violated by those who run this country during the Vietnam War, during the Korean War. So save that BS line that they were patriots who fought and died for our rights to do this or to do that. None of you, I'm sorry to say, even those who are serving right now, none of you, now and none of them in the past, have ever fought for our rights to do anything, because at the same time that these wars were being fought, our rights were being violated right here in this country, again, not by an outside enemy, but by the very people who run this country and government. So spare us the bullshit line about, people fought and died for me to do this or to do that. No one has fought. The only ones who fought for us to do anything would be Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Medgar Evers.
Ironically, Medgar Evers is actually one of those people that proves that Tomi doesn't know what the hell she's talking about. He actually went to war for America during World War II, fought in Europe, yet had to come home and be denied his basic human rights by his own damn country. And of course, he was murdered. He was a civil rights leader, and he was murdered for speaking out against racism. I guess he was one of those whiny crybabies.
Black Panthers, people such as this, these are people who fought and died for our, they were literally fighting for our rights in the United States. But no soldiers, I'm sorry, soldiers, but none of you, veterans, past or present, have fought for our right to do anything. Especially in these current wars. A lot of these current wars, we've seen that, you know, this is that they were about these corporations making a bunch of money in the invaded country. Iraq, Dynacor, and Halliburton, all that. That's what you're fighting for. You're fighting for them to make money. You're fighting for them to pillage and plunder. That's what you're fighting for. You're not fighting for my right, because first of all, Iraq, you know, was nowhere near being able to take away anybody's right in this country in the first place, right? Plus, it was said that we went to Iraq for what? For weapons of mass destruction, not because our rights were in danger, that the country was in danger of being invaded or taken over and our rights being taken away. No, that it was supposed to be about weapons of mass destruction, and of course that turned out to be a lie, because no such weapons were ever found. So please save us that line that, you know, these people fought for our rights, and especially black Americans. You didn't fight for our rights at all. You didn't fight for our rights at all. A beautiful example is Hitler. When the United States was fighting in World War II against Hitler, how are you going to go fight in a foreign country against Hitler when right here in the United States during the 1930s, 1940s, black Americans are being lynched, don't have the right to vote, discrimination, legal discrimination, right? All of these different things. So the soldiers actually went and fought in Germany against Hitler, only to come home to face the same kind of discrimination that Hitler and the Nazis were doing against Jews. They came home and faced that same kind of discrimination right here by their own countrymen. Meanwhile, they gave their lives. They went and fought and put their life on the line to free somebody else when they couldn't free us right here. So please don't give us that nonsense about fighting for our rights here, because I'm sorry, that just didn't happen. So Colin Kaepernick and anybody else, including myself, who does not stand for the national anthem or puts our hand over our heart during the Pledge of Allegiance, we are justified in such, because this country has not stood up to the principles that it claims to espouse. And until then, I'm with Colin Kaepernick. Until then, there will be no standing for it. There will be no singing of it. There will be no Pledge of Allegiance of it. And I will teach my children the same until this country does right by us. No such respect is given to the anthem, flag, pledge, whatever. Okay? Plain and simple. So then she goes on to the other, you know, typical line. Well, if you don't like it, leave it.
And Colin, if this country disgusts you so much, leave.
Which really means stop reminding us of the evil and injustices that we do and have done. Right? That's what that means. When they tell you if you don't like it, leave it, that's what that means. That means please, you know, please shut up about that. We don't want to hear about the evil and injustices that we have done or continue to do, and we don't want to change it. So please, if you don't like it, just get out of here. If you don't like the way things are being done, get out of here. That's really what that amounts to. You see? That's what that amounts to. And believe me, they said the same thing to Martin Luther King. They love Martin Luther King now. But we've shown before that the FBI considered Martin Luther King a problem. They were tapping his phone. They were trying to destroy his movement, his character, his marriage. Even after he died, they were still tapping Coretta Scott King's phone calls and all these different things. Now, why would they do that to a man who was only seeking that which is right and correct? Why would they do that? You know why? Because they were and are still about maintaining white supremacy. See? That's why Martin Luther King. So again, yeah, you know, the country pretends that they love him now. But at that time, Martin Luther King was not loved by the government. He was considered a problem. You see? So, and at his time, they said the same thing. Well, if you don't like it, leave it. Right? That's what they always say. Well, if you don't like the way it's done, just leave it. Instead of saying, you know what, you're right. What can we do to fix this? No, they'd rather just say, you know what, if you don't like it, leave it. Right? But, that's always funny. I'm always amused when I see the children of the colonialist invaders, the murderers, the thieves, talk about leaving a land that they are the inheritors of, which was stolen, invaded, genocidal. But if you don't love it, leave it, and all this nonsense that they talk, and borders and all this stuff. Now it's about borders. Now it's about loving it or leaving it. But meanwhile, you're the descendants of the invaders. So, again, spare us that nonsense. Okay? But again, that's what that means. When they tell you, if you don't like it, to leave it, that means we don't want to hear about the injustices that we're doing against you. Just shut up about it. We don't want to change. So if you don't like it, leave. That's what that translates into. Okay? And again, if Tomi had lived at the time of Martin Luther King, you could be assured that she would have been one of the talking heads that would have spoken against him. It's clear. It's very evident the way she talks now. It put her in that same context in that time period, and she would have been talking bad about Martin Luther King as a troublemaker, a race baiter, etc., a divider, all that. You can guarantee she would have been talking the same way. All right. So then she goes on to tell him, after talking about the if you don't like it, leave it thing, about, well, there are those who want to take your place.
I guarantee there are thousands and thousands of people around the world that would gladly take your spot. Because those that don't live under this flag are banging on the door to get in, not get out. Remember that.
Those who want to take anybody's place in this country, it's only about money, right? It's because they've been fed the fantasies. That's the only reason. Once they get here and then they learn, especially if they're people of color, and then they learn that once you get here, you're treated like garbage. You can face the police brutality, the discrimination because you're a Muslim. You can face the discrimination because you're a dark-skinned or black Latino person, right? Or even a non-black Latino person, right? Because we see already with the talk about the immigrants and the Mexicans and all this nonsense like that. So it really, it really doesn't matter. You know what I'm saying? So that they only want to come because there's this dream of the wealth that they can make until they really get here. Until they really get here and realize that, well, that's exactly what it is. It's a dream. It's a dream. You'll wind up in some slave wage job, barely able to get by. You'll be discriminated against because you're Mexican, because you're a Muslim, etc. So, they only want to come because of the illusion of the dream that's presented to them in their countries until they really get here and realize that, oh, it's not really all that they made it out to be. Then she says, what has Colin done to make it better?
Is our country perfect? No. But what have you done to make it better?
First of all, his deciding to not stand has caused, once again, us to face the realities of the injustices that are taking place, which starts us talking. And in fact, he has done things. He's donated to different charities and organizations that are attempting to work to deal with these issues that are being faced. She goes on to say, what's his contribution to black children going to be? To parade around with a chip on your shoulder like a victim?
What's your contribution? Sitting there like a fool? What selfish is you, buddy? And what's your message to black kids, to people of color? That their biggest contribution to justice and self-fulfillment is to parade around with a chip on their shoulder like a victim?
And again, that just goes back to that same we don't want to hear it line, right? We don't want to hear it line. But again, let me tell you this. It's perfectly legitimate to speak out against injustice. Don't ever let them try to make you feel bad about speaking out against the injustices that they have done or do to us or any other people. Don't ever let them try to embarrass you into thinking you should keep your mouth shut.
In the book, The Psychopathic Racial Personality by psychologist Dr. Bobby E. Wright, he writes on page 19 of his book, speaking about this very tactic of blaming the victim when it comes to racism. He says, in fact, whites have developed an effective defense mechanism, namely the guilt of the victim. So just as you saw Tomi do, saying, well, what's Colin doing? Teaching kids how to walk around with a chip on their shoulder and be nothing but a victim? blaming the victim instead of addressing the issue of systematic white racism. Instead of addressing it and saying, let's deal with it, no, they want to blame the victim. This is a defense mechanism, as the psychologist points out.
Because that's really what they don't want to hear it. Because they feel guilty, because they know they're wrong. You see? So don't ever let them try to make you feel shame about that. But no, that's not what he's contributing to black children. He's contributing to black children a sense of right and wrong. A sense that you have to take a stand. You can't allow the injustices to go forward. And that's not a victim mentality, especially when you are legitimately being victimized. There's nothing wrong with speaking out. Then she goes on to say that he blamed white people.
And Colin, how dare you sit there and blame white people for the problems of minority communities?
Well, when he has spoken, he never mentioned white people at all. But that's very telling that she makes that charge. You know why? Because although he didn't say white people, she knows where the guilt lies. Right? She knows where the guilt lies. Right? She knows where the guilt lies. So that's why she subconsciously had that in her mind and then verbalized that when he never mentioned white people at all. He spoke about injustices and oppression, but he never mentioned white people. But she took it as white people because she knows who the guilty party is. She knows who the guilty party is. She then brings up that he was adopted by 2 white parents, as if that changes anything.
After all, aren't you half white? Didn't 2 white parents adopt you after yours weren't willing to raise you? For a racist and horrible country filled with racist and horrible white people, that's really something, isn't it?
As if that means that racism, white supremacy, doesn't exist because 2 white parents adopted you. No one said that all white people are racist. But is there a system of white supremacy? No doubt about it. Is there institutionalized systemic racism here in the United States? Yes, there is. So 2 whites adopting him doesn't erase the fact that there is still systemic racism that is alive and well here in the United States. Right? She goes on to say, well, the next time maybe he should forget about that paycheck that he gets from the white team owner, etc. Once again,
maybe you should also decline the paycheck from the white owner of your team or the white fans that buy your merchandise and fill the stands to watch you play.
Look, first of all, he earns that paycheck, right? If it wasn't for so many of these black athletes, the game wouldn't exist. There would be no basketball to watch. Most of the teams are predominantly black. Many of the football teams, a lot of black men play. And people want to see them and their talent. So it's not so much that the paycheck is earned. People are coming to see their talent on display. So, please shut up with that nonsense. Because the white team owner would have no paycheck to give if it wasn't for the black talent that earns the money for these people and these teams. And then she asked, because Colin mentioned that there are people getting away with murder, referring to the many cases of police brutality and police shootings against unarmed persons. So she says, who's getting away with murder? She wanted to see proof.
And Colin, who's getting away with murder? I'd like to see some evidence to back that up, because that's a pretty strong claim.
Well, here, I'll give you a few examples. There is the example of Joseph Weekly. This is the officer who shot and killed 7-year-old Aiyana Stanley as she was sleeping. And this devil had the nerve to lie on the grandmother, claiming that the grandmother is what caused him to shoot.
And I'm laying there screaming, asking somebody to help my granddaughter, because he just shot her in the head. And he wouldn't even help her. They turned on the light and seen that she had been shot and killed out the house. Oh, man. Oh, my God. Oh, Jesus. Oh, white tell me why you come in my house like that. Tell me why you came in my house like that. You killed my grandbaby. You killed her and you try to blame me. You know I never touched you, Mr. Weekly. You know I never touched you. You know you're wrong.
Whether it was a mistake or not, at least even if it was a mistake, at least charge him with some type of negligent behavior. But no, all charges dropped. He got away with murder. Then there's Michael Brello. Michael Brello is the officer who shot the unarmed couple. I believe it was in Cleveland, Ohio. This dude thought he was Rambo. First of all, there were other officers. They didn't get charged at all. They shot combined 88 shots at this couple. They were unarmed. 88. What the hell do you need to do? Who did you think they were to shoot 88 times? All it takes is one or two shots to down somebody.
But check this out, everyone. Right? Look, this is what the judge in the case said. He ruled by himself instead of allowing a jury to make the ruling or the judgment. This is what the judge himself ruled and why he let the cop get away with murder. He said Brello's second round was permissible because a reasonable police officer could decide that even after 100 shots, the threat might not have been over, in part because the pair might still have been moving. What person in their reasonable mind would think that after you blast people with 100 bullets, that they might still be damn well alive to pose a threat to you? What person in their right goddamn mind would think that, oh, you know what? They just got shot 100 times. They might still be alive. But this is how white supremacy works. Come up with any bullshit excuse to let your fellow race soldiers off the hook and get away with murder. Total BS.
Why the hell did they shoot 88 times at these people? So all these other officers, they got away with murder, Tommy, because they weren't charged at all. Officer Brello, was the one had to face the charges by himself. But check what this devil did. He jumped on top of the hood of the car and starts blasting into the car 49 times. Now, for those of you who don't know, there's no handgun that holds 49 bullets. That means this devil had to empty his clip, right? Probably had a 15 or 16 round clip. That means he had to empty the clip, take another clip, throw it in there, empty that one. But guess what happened, everybody? Guess what happened? All charges dropped. The couple was unarmed, didn't have any weapons. But again, what the hell does it take? But see, I don't know. I think this is the historical fear. Unjustified fear. That's why I said unjustified fear that whites have of black people. They've hated us for centuries, decades. So much so that when it comes to this stuff like this, I don't know, they go into a frenzy and want to murder us. They see something that's not there. They see an illusion of something that's not there because it's their fear. But like I said, he jumped on the hood of the car, Rambo style, jumped on the hood of the car, blasting into the front window. Meanwhile, the other cops already shot from a distance, 88 shots at this couple. Who did they think was in there? Beast, monsters, werewolves, vampires? Why the hell would you shooting some humans 88 times? And he got away with murder, Tommy. Another case of somebody who got away with murder was the Eric Garner. And I could mention many others, but for the sake of time, we're just going to give you 3. There are many others I could mention of officers who've gotten away with murder. Eric Garner, another one, because we all saw it on tape. He's being choked. He's telling the officer, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Does the officer let up? No. He holds the choke hold. gets away with murder. He's acquitted. All charges dropped. Gets to go home. So these are examples, Tommy, of people who are getting away with murder. And like I said, I could mention others, but for the sake of time, I give you these three. But then again, this is typical suspected or direct white supremacist tactic to deny any wrongdoing or blame the victim, right? Or blame the victim for their own death, even though we have the evidence is clear that they are not at fault for their own death. Then she claims that Colin is oppressed. Well, he never said that he himself was oppressed.
And what about the oppression of black people? It's funny. Through that 6-year career of yours, you choose to start sitting now? What changed to make you so resentful of your country? Please tell me how you're oppressed.
He said that he's standing with the oppressed. He understands that he is in a position as a sports star for his voice to be heard. So he says that he is standing with the oppressed. He's showing his support for the oppressed. Not that he himself was necessarily oppressed, but that he was showing his support for the oppressed, standing with the oppressed. Tommy, that's what he said. And again, that's an honorable thing to do. Just like Muhammad Ali saying that he wouldn't go fight in Vietnam. And again, if Tommy had lived during that time, I guarantee you she would have made her final thoughts about Muhammad Ali. She would have talked about Muhammad Ali not going to the Vietnam War, calling him all type of names, even though he had a legitimate stance at his time, just as Colin has a legitimate stance at this day and time right now. The next thing she goes on to is about us having the black president.
Well, we've had a black president for almost 8 years now. Maybe he failed you.
It's funny, how she wanted to point out Colin's, hat being mixed to try to, I guess, discredit his attempt to stand up for oppressed people or whatever. Maybe she feels that somehow, negates that. But when it comes to Obama, they forget to mention that he's also half. He's mixed. He's half black, half white. Why don't you bring that up when it comes to Obama? Oh, he's the black president now. Now he's fully black now. But for Colin, oh no, he's half black, half white to try to take his credibility away in taking his stance. But for Obama, she says, oh, you had a black president. How come he couldn't fix the problems in the black community? Well, first of all, he only served 2 terms. And the problems in the black community are centuries and decades old. So how do you expect somebody who serves 8 years to be able to fix centuries old problems that were created by the systemic racism that this country has historically had? Okay. Then her last thing is, of course, because white racists don't want to deal with their problem. They don't want to face they don't want to do something about racism. They don't want to, the white racists I'm talking about. There are other whites who want to deal with it and help, yes. But white racists like Tommy, they don't want to address it. They don't want to deal with institutionalized racism. So she says, when is the black community going to take responsibility for its own problems and stop blaming whites?
Where does the buck stop? When will those in black communities take a step back and take some responsibility for the problems in black communities? Because it seems to me blaming white people for all of your problems might make you the racist.
She says, oh, doesn't that make you racist when you blame whites for these? No, it doesn't make you racist. And black people we've been trying to take care of the responsibilities and problems in our own communities. The problem is, whenever we attempt to do so, we're stopped. Look what you did to Martin Luther King. Right? Look what happened with Malcolm X. And I know what you're going to say if anybody brings it up. He was killed by some other black people. Look at the FBI files on Malcolm X and see. Although it may have been black hands who pulled the triggers, look and see that, you ever heard there were and are black agents, double agents, who are willing to work, who were and are willing to work against any black movements. They're here now, and they were in existence back then. Again, look at the FBI files on Malcolm X, and you'll see that the government definitely was trying to exacerbate tensions between Malcolm and the Nation of Islam. They also did that with the Black Panthers, exacerbating issues, fanning the flames between the Black Panthers and other black gangs. What's those groups? The Rhinestone Rangers, I think they were called, or the Blackstone Rangers, and other black gangs. They were creating issues between these groups to destroy them. See? And the Black Panthers is the perfect example. When the Black Panthers decided to do something about the problems in the black community, they started free breakfast programs, free lunch programs, free health care, and all these different things. The government wanted to destroy them, and did destroy them. When they were talking about, you know what, we got to defend ourselves, we got to start arming ourselves to defend ourselves, the government went, prepared, and destroyed them, Tommy.
There's also the Nation of Islam. The Nation of Islam, with their security force, have done a lot of work in black communities throughout the nation, even in Chicago, you know, where they have the high rate of drugs and violence, and in many cities where this problem was taking place. The FOI, the Nation of Islam Security Force, did a lot of good work to clean these neighborhoods up. But again, what happened? They were worked against. They had contracts to do security, and their security contracts were the most effective. But what happened? Government said nope, cut off their contracts, and now the communities are back to being violent. In fact, here's an article that praised them for their work. Take a look. This was an article from the Chicago Tribune entitled DC's Black Muslim Dope Busters by Clarence Page. It reads, in Washington, D.C., where drug wars have turned our national capital into the world's murder capital, the most effective anti-drug unit has turned out to be an unusual bunch of volunteers who call themselves the Dope Busters. They have no official connection to the police, the FBI, or drug czar William Bennett, who was the drug czar at the time. They are black Muslims, members of Minister Louis Farrakhan's controversial Nation of Islam. They began patrolling Mayfair Mansions, an all-black, formerly middle-class apartment development, last year after residents invited them to try their luck against local drug dealers. The results were immediate and decisive. After a few confrontations with Muslim-style rough justice in Mayfair and the Paradise Manor apartments next door, local drug dealers took their trade elsewhere. Local crime went down. Drug-related killings stopped. Though the District of Columbia police chief criticized the Muslim organization as vigilantism at first, the support of some district council members brought cooperation. Residents breathed easier. Children again played outdoors. Senior citizens walked in peace. Requests for more Muslim aid poured in from neighborhood, civic, tenant, and religious groups throughout the Washington area. Just as criminal activity feeds on itself, so does community crime fighting. So, Tommy, we have been trying to take care of our own damn problems, but every time we are successful, it appears that the white supremacists don't want that. They want us to destroy ourselves. So what do? They then stop the Nation of Islam contracts. Despite the success, all of a sudden, Nation of Islam security firm loses ground. Washington Post, December 14th, 1995. Nation of Islam guards ordered to leave housing projects. New York Times, September 13th, 1996. HUD cancels Nation of Islam security contract. Chicago Tribune, November 10th, 1995. After their clear success in cleaning up the neighborhood, stopping the violence, white supremacy said, nope, can't have that. So it's become evidently clear over the decades and years that whenever we try to clean ourselves up, organize ourselves, clean up our neighborhoods, fight the crime, fight the drugs, we're stopped. We try to clean up our women, have our women dress respectfully. No, y'all want the twerking and you want to promote the ratchetness. So it's clear that white supremacists in power do not want us to clean up our neighborhoods, to stop the violence. They want us to kill each other. They want us dead, and that's clearly evident every time we try to organize ourselves and they try to stop us.
whenever we do attempt to take care of our problems, some unseen hand in the government attempts to destroy us, Tommy. So please stop with that nonsense. And again, the thing about blaming whites, well, many of the problems that we face in the black community, unfortunately, come from white racism. Have you heard of redlining, Tommy?
Redlining was and is the practice of denying or limiting financial services to certain neighborhoods based on racial or ethnic composition without regard to the residents' qualifications or credit worthiness. This was purposely done to deny black people access to wealth, access to land, while at the same time openly and freely making sure that whites had access to this. So please shut the F up forever, Tommy, when you talk this nonsense about responsibility for communities. How can you do so when there are forces outside trying purposely to destroy you and make sure that you wind up in a failing position?
Redlining is what created the ghettos in the first place. It created the ghettos in the first place, denying black people the ability to get loans, but giving whites after, you know, the World War II period and the Vietnam era, giving them loans to get homes and gain land, while blacks were denied these things. That created the ghettos. That created the poverty. The war on drugs, Tommy. We have a former aide of Nixon, Mr. John Ehrlichman, who was a Nixon aide, admitted that the Nixon policy from '68 on was to create this war on drugs thing, and it purposely targeted blacks.
He was quoted as saying, "You want to know what this was really all about?" He asked with the bluntness of a man who, after public disgrace and a stretch in federal prison, had little left to protect. The Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies, the anti-war left and black people. You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black. But by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could I want you to pay attention, Tommy. Look what he says. We could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. So, can we blame some whites for what happened in the black community? Oh, you better believe it.
Targeted blacks and those who were anti-war, but particularly blacks. And of course, the war on drugs continued on up until today, and those policies are still in effect. Although there are stats that show that, you know, there are a lot of other drugs that whites partake of more than blacks, but we seem to be the victims of this policy, such as the crack cocaine punishments, right? You were back in the 80s, a person could get a harsher punishment for the crack, which is a cheap form of cocaine, than for the expensive pure powder cocaine. As I was saying, the war on drugs thing also continued on after Nixon's period into the 80s, such as with the crack cocaine punishments, where a person selling crack, which was known to be in the poor black neighborhoods, could get a harsher punishment for selling just cheap form of cocaine, crack cocaine, than a person in the suburbs and white neighborhoods selling the pure powder cocaine, which was more expensive. It's more expensive, but you can get more punishment for the crack cocaine. Why? Why the disparity in punishment? Why the double standard? Because, of course, they wanted systemic racism, wanted to punish blacks more. Another example of the problems that we face are due to white racism is what was called the Southern Strategy, which is why you don't see many blacks being Republicans.
As I stated, this is the strategy that caused black Americans to move away and stay away from the Republican Party, which prior had been a friend of the black American. But in American politics, the Southern strategy is the plan in which the Republican Party gained political support in the Southern United States by using a strategy appealing to racism against African Americans. And by the way, let me add that I'm not a liberal. I'm not a Democrat. I don't support the Democratic Party either. But when it came to the Republican Party, this is the strategy that they picked up, which again promoted and continues to promote stereotypes and racism against black people. Tommy.
The Southern strategy, created by Lee Atwater, who was a political party consultant, created what was called the Southern strategy, which was to use coded racism to gain the votes of whites, which is like what Donald Trump is doing. He's using the Southern strategy right now. And people like yourself use. You can't come out and say the blatant racist things, so you use the coded words. But people, we know what you're talking about, and white racists know what you're talking about. That's why white racists love you, Tommy. That's why the white redneck racists and other whites who are not rednecks came out for Trump. Because although he doesn't have to say the words directly, he doesn't have to use the N-word directly or any other racial terms, but he's using the coded words, and people, they know exactly what he's talking about. So this was the Southern strategy that was created, which turned the Republican Party to, once having been a friend of black Americans, to be an enemy of black Americans. And this is why today many blacks do not see eye to eye with the Republican Party. And this strategy was created to get white votes by using racism, Tommy. So these are the issues, and of course these false claims demonized blacks, perpetuated stereotypes and things of this nature, which of course what? Perpetuates racism. And of course, if you're an individual, individuals become communities, communities become governments, and if a community has these thoughts, these racist thoughts, and you get into power as a judge, a police officer, a governor, a legislator, etc., then you can put your racist beliefs into practice to harm the people whom you dislike. There's another incident, there's another issue that makes the point. There's an organization known as the Innocence Project, which has, over the last few years or so, been working to prove the innocence over by now probably hundreds of people, many of them black, many of them black men, proving them innocence from cases decades ago. And why? How are they able to prove them innocent? Because of the new technology that we have with DNA and things of this nature. But why were they convicted in the first place? Well, of course, it was due to what? Systemic racism in the system. So, Tommy, when we blame white racism, we have a legitimate position to blame white racism for many of the problems in the black community. Because many of these problems were created by white racists. So until you and people like you are ready to face these problems and do something about the problems of white racism in your own damn communities, don't sit here and bitch to us about when are we going to take responsibility for our own. Because like I said, we've been trying to take responsibility for our own problems, but every time we do so, we are thwarted in some shape, form, or fashion. Okay? So, those are my final thoughts about your BS rant about the national anthem and Kaepernick.